Officer Delane's fist connected with Marcus Johnson's face with enough force to snap his head backward. The handcuffed 17-year-old straightened slowly before being roughly shoved into the back seat. As the patrol car pulled away, Marcus closed his eyes and focused on his breathing, knowing his father would soon be wondering why he hadn't returned from basketball practice, and knowing with absolute certainty that the officers who thought they were teaching some random black kid a lesson had just made the most catastrophic mistake of their careers. They had assaulted the only son of the state attorney general. The rhythmic bounce of the basketball against the pavement matched Marcus Johnson's heartbeat as he made his way home from evening practice. At 17, Marcus carried himself with the grace of an athlete and the focus of a scholar, his 6 feet 2 inches frame moving with purpose. Coach had been particularly impressed with his three-point shooting today, suggesting he might start in Friday's game. The thought brought a small smile to his face. Starting as a junior would look good on college applications, another achievement to add alongside his 3.9 GPA. Marcus checked the time on his phone. He'd promised his father he'd be home by 6:30 for dinner. His father, William Johnson, the state's attorney general, valued timeliness almost as much as he valued integrity, traits that had shaped Marcus's own approach to life. As he turned onto Maple Street, Marcus noticed the flash of red and blue lights reflected off a nearby car window. He glanced over his shoulder to see a police cruiser moving slowly along the street about half a block behind him. Something in his chest tightened instinctively. A learned response formed from 17 years of cautionary talks with his father. William had always been clear: be respectful, keep your hands visible, don't make sudden movements, and always stay calm. Marcus lowered the volume on his headphones but didn't remove them, continuing his steady pace while keeping the cruiser in his peripheral vision. When the cruiser pulled alongside him and then angled toward the curb, blocking his path, Marcus knew his walk home had just become complicated. He stopped, removed his headphones, and let them rest around his neck, remembering his father's words. Hands where they can see them, son. Always. 2 officers emerged from the vehicle. The driver's nameplate read Morrison. The other officers identified him as Delane. Afternoon, Officer Morrison said, his tone neutral but his eyes sharp and assessing. Mind if we ask what you're doing in this neighborhood? Marcus felt a familiar weight settle in his stomach. Just walking home from basketball practice, sir. I live a few blocks from here. Officer Delane moved closer, his gaze sweeping over Marcus's athletic build. You got some ID on you? Marcus shook his head slightly. No, sir. I just came from practice and didn't bring my wallet. My house is just up on Oakwood Drive, about 3 blocks from here. The officers exchanged a glance that made Marcus's skin prickle with unease. No ID, huh? Officer Morrison's voice hardened. That's convenient. And you expect us to believe you live in Oakwood Estates? Those are million-dollar homes, son. Yes, sir. My father and I have lived there for about 6 years now. Number 347, the blue colonial with white trim. Officer Delane moved a step closer. What's your name? Marcus Johnson, sir. And what's your father do that he can afford a place in Oakwood Estates, Marcus? He works for the state government, Marcus answered, deliberately keeping his response vague. Experience had taught him that sometimes revealing his father's position created more problems than it solved. Officer Morrison snorted. State government, huh? Custodian? Maintenance. Officer Morrison circled Marcus slowly. You know what I think? I think we've got ourselves someone casing these houses, maybe looking for an open window or an empty home to break into. No, sir. That's not what's happening. I really do live in this neighborhood. If you'd like to escort me home, my father can verify everything. Officer Delane scoffed. Listen to that. Escort me home, like we're some kind of chauffeur service. He reached out suddenly, grabbing Marcus's gym bag and yanking it from his shoulder. What have you got in here? Anything we should know about? Just my basketball uniform and some school books, Marcus replied, fighting every instinct that told him to reach for his property as Officer Delane unzipped the bag and roughly dug through its contents. The officer pulled out a calculus textbook, waving it mockingly. Well, a real scholar here, Morrison. He tossed the book carelessly back into the bag before continuing his search, dumping Marcus's neatly folded uniform onto the sidewalk. Please be careful with my things, Marcus said, his voice quieter now. I haven't done anything wrong. Officer Morrison moved back into Marcus's field of vision. You want to talk about doing something wrong? How about trespassing? How about lying to officers? Officer Delane had finished rifling through the gym bag and turned his attention to Marcus's pockets. Empty them, he commanded. Marcus slowly reached into his sweatpants pockets, producing only his phone, house key, and some loose change. Officer Delane snatched the phone from his hand, examining the lock screen. A photo of Marcus with his father at a law school fundraiser. Fancy phone for a kid, Delane remarked. Where'd you get this? Who'd you take it from? It's my phone, Marcus said, frustration finally creeping into his voice. My father got it for me for my birthday last year. Morrison moved closer. Your father who works for the state government, right? The one who bought that $1 million house on Oakwood? You expect us to believe that? Look, Marcus said, trying a different approach. You can call my father if you want to verify. His number is in my phone, or we can walk to my house. It's really just a few blocks from here. Officer Delane's hand suddenly shot out, gripping Marcus's upper arm with bruising force. You trying to tell us how to do our job now? Sounds like you need to learn some respect. Marcus winced at the painful grip. I respect your authority, sir. I'm just trying to explain the situation. The situation, Officer Morrison said, stepping even closer, is that we've got a suspicious individual with no ID in a high-value neighborhood where he doesn't belong giving us lip. He nodded to Delane. I think we need to continue this conversation down at the station. Please, Marcus said, his voice still controlled but tinged with genuine alarm. Just call my father. He's expecting me home for dinner. He'll be worried. Oh, Daddy's going to be worried. Delane mocked, shoving Marcus forward. My father is William Johnson, Marcus said, finally deciding that revealing his father's identity might be his only option. He's the state attorney general. Both officers froze momentarily before exchanging glances. Officer Morrison's expression darkened. You think that's funny? You think making up lies about who your daddy is will help you right now? I'm not lying, Marcus insisted. My father is William Johnson, the attorney general. You can verify. The rest of his sentence was cut off as Officer Morrison suddenly grabbed the front of his shirt, slamming him back against the cruiser with enough force to knock the wind from his lungs. That's enough of your smart mouth. One more word about being the Attorney General's son, and I'll add impersonating a public official to your charges. Marcus felt the cold metal of the car against his back, the officer's forearm now pressing against his chest. Hands on the vehicle, Officer Delane commanded, spinning Marcus around roughly and kicking his feet apart. Marcus did know. He spread his fingers against the cool metal of the police cruiser as Officer Delane began patting him down with unnecessary roughness. Nothing here, Delane finally announced, sounding disappointed. No weapon, no drugs. Turn around, Officer Morrison ordered. Marcus complied slowly. So you still sticking with that story about your daddy being the big shot attorney general? It's the truth, Marcus replied, keeping his voice level. My father is William Johnson. We live at 347 Oakwood Drive. You can verify. Morrison's hand shot out, shoving Marcus hard against the cruiser. I told you to cut that crap. You hear this kid, Delane? Morrison turned to his partner with exaggerated disbelief. Still running his mouth about living in Oakwood. Delane shook his head, a smirk playing at the corners of his mouth. Yeah, and I'm the damn governor. Marcus took a deep breath. I'd like to call my father. I have the right to make a phone call. Morrison's laugh was harsh. You watch too much TV, kid. You're not under arrest yet, so you don't get a phone call. Hands behind your back, Morrison barked suddenly, reaching for his handcuffs. You're being detained for further questioning. Marcus felt cold dread wash over him. On what charge? Suspicious activity, possible trespassing, and now interfering with an officer, Delane answered, grabbing Marcus's arm and roughly pulling it behind his back. Plus, you got a real attitude problem. Marcus winced as the handcuffs bit into his wrists, tightened with deliberate excess. This is bullshit, he muttered under his breath, immediately regretting the lapse. What was that? Delane demanded, his voice dangerously soft. You got something to say? Marcus shook his head. No, sir. Nah. I heard you. Delane continued, spinning Marcus around to face him. You said this is bullshit, didn't you? You think you can disrespect officers doing their job? I didn't mean. The rest of his sentence was cut off as Delane's fist connected with his cheekbone. The force of the blow snapping Marcus's head to the side and sending him staggering back against the cruiser. Pain exploded across the side of his face, his vision momentarily blurring. "You need to learn some respect," Delane growled, advancing on him again. Marcus raised his cuffed hands instinctively, a reflexive gesture of self-protection that Delane interpreted as resistance. "He's resisting," Delane shouted, lunging forward and grabbing Marcus by the throat. "I'm not," Marcus choked out, but his protest was lost as Morrison joined the fray, both officers now forcing him to the ground. Marcus felt his knees hit the pavement hard, then his shoulder as they pushed him down. "Stop resisting," Morrison yelled, loud enough for anyone nearby to hear, creating a narrative that bore no relation to reality. His knee pressed into Marcus's back, driving the air from his lungs while Delane held his head against the rough concrete. "I'm not resisting," Marcus gasped, barely able to draw breath. He could feel warm wetness on his face, blood from where his cheek had been split open. "Shut your mouth," Delane hissed, pressing Marcus's face harder against the ground. The memory of his father's voice cut through his panic. "Stay alive. Nothing else matters. Just stay alive and come home." So Marcus forced himself to go limp beneath the officer's brutal restraint, surrendering completely. "That's better," Morrison said after a moment. "Now maybe you're ready to tell us the truth about who you are." "My name is Marcus Johnson," he repeated, his words slurred from the swelling. "My father is William Johnson, the state attorney general. We live at 347 Oakwood Drive." Morrison grabbed a handful of Marcus's hair, yanking his head back painfully. "You still sticking with that story? Even now?" "It's the truth," Marcus insisted. "Please just take me home or call my father." The officers exchanged glances, then hauled him roughly to his feet. "All right, tough guy," Delane said, shoving Marcus toward the cruiser. "Let's go downtown." As they approached the vehicle, Marcus saw a woman walking her dog across the street, watching with obvious concern. "Ma'am," he called out, "could you please call William Johnson at the Attorney General's office? Tell him Marcus is being." A hard blow to his kidney cut him off. "Shut your mouth," Morrison hissed, forcing Marcus's head down as he pushed him into the back seat. The door slammed shut with finality. Inside the cruiser, separated from the officers by a plastic partition, Marcus finally allowed himself to feel the full weight of his situation. His face throbbed, blood still seeping from the cut on his cheekbone. His wrists burned from the too tight handcuffs. He thought of his father waiting at home, dinner getting cold. Growing increasingly concerned as the engine started and the vehicle pulled away from the curb, Marcus closed his eyes and drew on the deep well of composure his father had helped him cultivate over years of carefully worded warnings. "This isn't about fairness," his father had told him once. "It's about survival. You get through it, you come home, and then we fight back the right way." The cruiser pulled into the station parking lot. Morrison opened the rear door and yanked Marcus out by his arm, causing him to stumble. "Let's go, hotshot. Time to process you properly." Several heads turned as the officers marched Marcus through the main area, his handcuffed wrists and bloodied face drawing curious glances. Marcus kept his eyes forward, trying to project dignity despite his appearance. "Got a live one here, Sarge," Delane called out as they approached the processing desk. "Suspicious activity, trespassing, resisting arrest, and assaulting an officer." The desk sergeant, an older man with salt and pepper hair, looked up. His gaze moved from the officers to Marcus, lingering on the teenager's swollen face. "Assaulted an officer, did he? Which one of you?" "Both of us," Morrison replied smoothly. "Kid went crazy when we questioned him about being in Oakwood Estates. Started claiming he lives there, that his daddy's the attorney general. When we tried to detain him, he took a swing at Delane." The sergeant's eyebrows rose slightly. "That right?" he asked, his question directed at Marcus. Before Marcus could respond, Delane's hand clamped down hard on his shoulder. "Don't waste your time, Sarge. Kid's been spinning tales all night." The sergeant held Marcus's gaze a moment longer before returning his attention to the paperwork. "Name?" "Marcus Johnson," Marcus answered, his voice steady despite the dull throb of pain. "I live at 347 Oakwood Drive. My father is William Johnson, the state attorney general. I was walking home from basketball practice when these officers..." Delane's grip tightened painfully. "Still with the same story. Unbelievable." The sergeant's pen hovered over the form. "Johnson? William Johnson's son." He looked at Marcus more carefully now. "That's what he claims," Morrison said dismissively. Been saying it since we picked him up. Kid's delusional. Have you verified his identity? He had no ID on him, Delane said quickly. Convenient, right? I was coming from basketball practice, Marcus repeated, sensing a possible ally in the sergeant. My wallet's at home. Please just call my father or take me home to verify. Morrison stepped forward. Look, Sarge, we've got an uncooperative suspect who was casing houses in Oakwood, resisted arrest, and assaulted officers. We need to process him, not listen to more of his fantasies. The sergeant held Morrison's gaze for a long moment before nodding slightly. Process him then. Marcus felt his hope deflate as Morrison grabbed his arm again. They led him to a processing area where a bored-looking technician took his photograph and fingerprints. Beautiful, Delane commented as the mugshot appeared on the technician's screen, showing Marcus's swollen face in harsh detail. That's going to look great on your college applications. From the processing area, they moved to an interrogation room, a small windowless space with a metal table bolted to the floor. Morrison shoved Marcus roughly into one of the chairs before removing his handcuffs, only to immediately refasten one cuff to a metal loop on the table. Wait here, he ordered. We'll be back after we finish the paperwork. The door opened abruptly, startling Marcus as Morrison and Delane re-entered, accompanied by a third man in plain clothes, a detective, based on the badge clipped to his belt. So, the detective began, taking the seat across from Marcus. I'm Detective Rivera. I understand we've had some trouble tonight. Yes, sir, Marcus replied, straightening in his chair. These officers stopped me while I was walking home from basketball practice. When I explained who I was and that I live in the neighborhood, they accused me of lying, handcuffed me, and assaulted me. He gestured toward his face. This was from Officer Delane's fist, not from any resistance on my part. Morrison stepped forward. That's not how it happened, Detective. This kid was acting suspicious in Oakwood Estates. When we questioned him, he became belligerent, then physically resistant when we attempted to detain him. I didn't resist, Marcus countered firmly. I was complying with all instructions. Officer Delane struck me after I muttered something under my breath. Then they both tackled me to the ground while I was already handcuffed. Rivera's gaze moved between Marcus and the officers. Quite the different accounts. What were you doing in Oakwood Estates? I live there, Marcus repeated. 347, Oakwood Drive with my father, William Johnson. The Attorney General, Rivera stated neutrally. Yes, sir. Rivera turned to the officers. Did you attempt to verify his address or identity? Delane shifted his weight. Kid had no ID. Said his wallet was at home. Convenient excuse. And you didn't offer to just drive him to the address he gave to verify? Rivera asked the officers. Morrison interjected. We had a suspicious individual in a high-value neighborhood who couldn't produce ID and became increasingly belligerent when questioned. Standard procedure is to bring them in. Rivera nodded slowly, then returned his attention to Marcus. You're entitled to a phone call. Who would you like to contact? Before Marcus could answer, the door to the interrogation room swung open and the desk sergeant appeared, his expression unusually tense. Detective, he said, ignoring the officers. The young man's phone call has already been made. His father is here. A beat of silence followed. Delane snorted dismissively. Sure he is. The sergeant's face remained grave. State Attorney General William Johnson is in the lobby demanding to see his son and the officers who arrested him. He's already called the chief. The color drained from Morrison's face as Rivera stood abruptly. Uncuff him, the detective ordered, his voice taking on new urgency. Now, Delane hesitated, looking to Morrison, who seemed frozen. Detective, procedure requires. I said uncuff him, officer. Now. Rivera's tone left no room for argument. A.S. Delane reluctantly moved to remove the handcuff from Marcus's wrist. Footsteps echoed in the hallway. Purposeful, measured steps approaching with unstoppable momentum. Marcus recognized the rhythm immediately. The door opened, and William Johnson filled the frame. 6'4" of controlled fury in an impeccably tailored suit. His gaze swept the room, cataloging everything in seconds before settling on his son's battered face. For a brief moment, raw anguish flickered across his features before being replaced by composed, implacable resolve. Marcus, he said, his deep voice surprisingly gentle despite the steel beneath it. Are you all right? The simple question nearly broke Marcus's carefully maintained composure. He swallowed hard. I'll be okay, Dad. William nodded once, his eyes never leaving his son's injured face before turning to the officers. When he spoke again, his voice was cold enough to crystallize the air. Which one of you put your hands on my son? Neither Morrison nor Delane seemed capable of speech. Detective Rivera stepped forward. Mr. Attorney General, I'm Detective Rivera. I was just beginning to— Detective, William cut him off smoothly. I appreciate your intervention, but my question was directed at these officers. His attention returned to Morrison and Delane. I'll ask once more. Which of you struck my son? Morrison found his voice first. Sir, I'm Officer Morrison. This is Officer Delane. There was an altercation during the arrest when your son resisted. My son has a split cheekbone and what appears to be a black eye forming. William interrupted. That didn't happen during an altercation. That happened when one of you struck him with enough force to cause significant injury. Now, before I review the body cam footage that I've already requested be preserved, I'm giving you the opportunity to tell me directly. The mention of body cam footage sent a visible ripple of tension through both officers. Dad, Marcus interjected. It was Officer Delane who hit me in the face. Officer Morrison held me down afterward. William nodded once. Thank you, Marcus. He turned to Detective Rivera. I want my son released into my custody immediately. I want him examined by a doctor and his injuries documented, and I want these officers' badges and firearms surrendered while a full investigation takes place. The police chief appeared in the hallway. William, he began. Let's move this discussion to my office. After my son receives medical attention, William countered, walking over to Marcus and gently helping him to his feet. And after these officers are removed from duty, he turned to the desk sergeant. Sergeant, please escort Officers Morrison and Delane to surrender their badges and firearms. The sergeant looked to the chief, who after a moment's hesitation nodded grimly. Do it, and call internal affairs. As the officers were led away, William finally allowed himself to focus fully on his son. Let's get you to the hospital. The drive to the emergency room passed in relative silence. I'm sorry, Dad, Marcus finally said. William frowned briefly. What on earth are you apologizing for? For not calling earlier, for not finding a way to avoid this whole situation. Marcus, William interrupted, his voice gentle but firm. You did exactly what you were supposed to do. You survived. Everything else can be addressed. At the emergency room, a middle-aged doctor examined Marcus, cleaning the cut on his cheekbone and applying butterfly bandages. She documented each injury meticulously. You're lucky the orbital bone wasn't fractured, she noted. But you're going to have quite a shiner for a while. As the doctor completed her paperwork, William stepped outside to make phone calls. When he returned, his expression was determined. The hospital administrator has agreed to expedite copies of your medical records. The chief has already placed both officers on administrative leave pending investigation. And I've called Michael to meet us at home to discuss legal options. Michael Torres, the family's longtime friend and one of the state's most formidable civil rights attorneys, by the time they pulled into their Oakwood Drive driveway, the very address the officers had refused to believe was Marcus's. It was nearly midnight to Marcus's mother, Catherine, a federal judge whose usual composure matched her husband's, gasped audibly when she saw her son's face. Oh, Marcus, she whispered, gently embracing him before her gaze hardened. They will answer for this, she stated, not a threat, but a simple declaration of fact. Michael Torres arrived shortly thereafter. As the adults gathered in the living room, Marcus found himself recounting the events for the third time. They didn't believe you lived here, Michael asked incredulously, even when you gave them the exact address. They didn't want to believe him, William corrected. This wasn't about verification. It was about power. They saw a young black man in an affluent neighborhood and made assumptions. When Marcus challenged those assumptions by insisting on his right to be there, they responded with force. Catherine looked up from her legal pad. What about witnesses? You mentioned a woman walking her dog. Marcus nodded. She saw part of it. She was across the street when they pushed me into the police car. I called out to her, asked her to contact Dad, but the officers cut me off. We'll find her, Michael assured them. Between the body cam footage, your medical records, and witness statements, we'll build an airtight case. A memory surfaced, his father sitting him down at age 12 after Tamir Rice's death, explaining with painful honesty the realities of being black in America. The world will not always see you as I do. William had told him. They will not see your grades, or your character, or your potential. Some will see only your skin, and they will make judgments based on that alone. It isn't fair. It isn't right. But understanding this reality might one day save your life. 5 years later, that lesson had indeed potentially saved his life. Marcus had followed the playbook faithfully, yet still ended up bloodied and handcuffed in a police station. The injustice of it burned in his chest. Marcus needs rest, Catherine finally said, noticing her son's drooping eyelids. We can continue this tomorrow. As Marcus headed upstairs, he could hear the conversation continuing below, his parents and Michael already shifting from documentation to strategy, from evidence collection to public response. Despite the pain and fatigue, a sense of purpose began to crystallize within him. What had happened tonight was not merely a personal injustice, but a symptom of a deeper societal illness. And while Marcus had been taught to survive such encounters, he now understood that survival was just the beginning. What came after, the accountability, the reform, the refusal to accept such treatment as inevitable, that was where real change would happen. As morning approached, the Johnson home buzzed with activity. William moved with methodical purpose through his home office, assembling documents. Catherine had transformed their dining room into a command center. The doorbell rang, announcing the arrival of Diane Chun along with the department's internal affairs director. The body cam footage has been secured, the IA director was saying. Preliminary review confirms your son's account entirely. It's damning. William nodded. I want formal charges prepared by noon. Assault on a minor, false imprisonment, filing false reports, civil rights violations, the complete list. No administrative leave with pay, no quiet resignation. These officers face the full consequences. The house phone rang. Yes, Governor, Catherine answered. We appreciate your concern. Yes, Marcus is recovering. William is preparing a formal statement for this morning. William returned to the kitchen. The officers are being called in right now. If you're feeling up to it, your statement to internal affairs would be valuable this morning. Marcus straightened. I'm ready now. I want to tell them exactly what happened. 2 hours later, Marcus sat in his father's office at the Department of Justice, his statement recorded and signed. The press conference is scheduled for 10, Diane informed William. It's already breaking on social media. Someone at the hospital leaked a photo of Marcus in the ER. William frowned. Unavoidable, I suppose. At least it shows the injuries clearly. Captain Reynolds entered. The officers have arrived at headquarters, sir. They've been informed they're under investigation, but haven't been shown the footage yet. Have them wait in separate rooms, William said. I'll be there shortly. He turned to Marcus. You don't have to attend this part if you don't want to. Marcus stood. I want to be there. I want them to see me. The hallways of police headquarters buzzed with unusual tension. Through one conference room window, Marcus could see Officer Morrison sitting alone, nervously tapping his fingers. When he glanced up and spotted Marcus standing beside his father, his face drained of color. As they entered, Morrison rose automatically. Sir, I understand there's been a complaint about last night's arrest procedure. William's laugh held no humor. A complaint? Is that what you call this? He gestured to Marcus's face. My son was assaulted while handcuffed and compliant. That goes well beyond a complaint, Officer Morrison. Morrison swallowed visibly. Sir, the situation last night was complex. We had reports of suspicious activity in Oakwood Estates, and when we encountered your son, he was unable to produce identification. Because I was coming from basketball practice, Marcus interjected, meeting Morrison's eyes steadily. I told you exactly who I was and where I lived. You chose not to believe me. Michael Torres placed a folder on the table. Officer Morrison, we've already reviewed the body cam footage. It clearly shows that at no point did Marcus resist arrest or act aggressively. It also clearly shows your partner striking Marcus without provocation while he was handcuffed. Morrison's professional facade cracked. Attorney General, I want to be clear that I didn't personally strike your son. That was Officer Delane's action, not mine. But you didn't stop him, William observed coldly. You then participated in tackling my handcuffed son to the ground, filing a false report claiming he resisted arrest, and processing charges you knew to be fraudulent. Morrison's gaze dropped to the table. I followed procedure for a suspect. A suspect? William interrupted, his voice rising for the first time. He's a 17-year-old boy walking home from basketball practice in his own neighborhood to his own house. The address he gave you repeatedly was correct. At what point did your procedure require assaulting a minor?